The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills of Whitmore, Texas, a town so small that everyone knew everyone, and weddings were community celebrations that brought the whole town together. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple white dress that had belonged to her grandmother. At 26, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that didn't need enhancement. Auburn hair that caught the sunlight, green eyes that sparkled with genuine warmth, and a smile that had comforted countless patients during her 5 years as a registered nurse at Whitmore General Hospital. "Sarah, honey, you sure you don't want something fancier?" Her mother, Linda Mitchell, asked from the doorway. Linda had worked double shifts at the local diner for months, setting aside every spare dollar to help make her daughter's wedding day special. The concern in her voice was evident. She wanted Sarah to have everything she deserved, even if their family's modest means couldn't provide it. "Mom, this dress is perfect," Sarah replied, turning to face her mother with tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Grandma Rose looked beautiful in it, and I feel her with me when I wear it. That's worth more than any expensive gown from Dallas." Outside, the October air carried the crisp promise of autumn. The wedding was set for that afternoon at the Whitmore Community Church, followed by a reception in the church hall. Nothing fancy. Folding tables covered with Linda's homemade tablecloths, wildflowers picked from the surrounding fields, and a playlist of country music that Jake Thompson, the groom, had spent weeks perfecting on an old sound system borrowed from the high school. Jake was everything Sarah had ever dreamed of in a partner. At 28, he had taken over his father's veterinary practice after graduating from Texas A&M University. His hands were strong from years of caring for animals, but gentle enough to comfort a frightened pet or hold Sarah's hand during quiet evening walks. His sandy brown hair always seemed slightly tousled from long days working on nearby ranches, and his blue eyes held the kind of honesty that made both animals and people trust him instantly. The couple had met 3 years earlier when Sarah brought her injured cat, Whiskers, to Jake's clinic. What started as a professional relationship quickly blossomed into friendship, then love. Jake had proposed on the very spot where they first met, in the small waiting room of Thompson Veterinary Clinic, down on one knee beside the same chair where Sarah had cried over her injured pet. "I want to spend every day making you as happy as you made me that first day," Jake had said, presenting a modest but beautiful engagement ring that had taken him 6 months to save for. "Will you marry me, Sarah Mitchell?" Now, 6 months later, their wedding day had arrived. Jake stood in the church basement, adjusting his tie for the 100th time. His best man, Marcus Rodriguez, had been his roommate at college and was now a successful rancher in the next county over. Marcus watched his nervous friend with amusement. "Jake, you've been with Sarah for 3 years. You sure you're ready for this?" Marcus teased, though his tone was affectionate. He had watched his friend fall completely in love, and he knew Jake and Sarah were perfect for each other. "Marcus, I've been ready since the day I met her," Jake replied, his voice steady despite his nervous energy. "I just want everything to be perfect for her. She deserves the world, and all I can give her is this." He gestured around the modest church basement where they were getting ready. "Brother, what you're giving her is your heart, and that's worth more than any fancy wedding," Marcus said, placing a supportive hand on Jake's shoulder. "Besides, you've got that special surprise planned for tonight. She's going to lose her mind when she hears you singing." Jake's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and terror. For months, he had been secretly taking guitar lessons from old Eddie Martinez, who ran the music shop in town. Jake's plan was to surprise Sarah during their first dance by singing "The Dance" by Garth Brooks, Sarah's favorite song and the one that had been playing on the radio during their first kiss. The song held special meaning for both of them. Sarah had always said that Garth Brooks's lyrics spoke to her soul, especially the dance, with its message about embracing love even when you know it might bring pain. She had a collection of Garth Brooks albums that she played constantly, and Jake had fallen in love with country music through her passion for it. He wasn't a natural singer, far from it, but he had practiced for hours every evening after work, determined to give Sarah a memory she would treasure forever. As the afternoon approached, the church began to fill with friends and neighbors. Whitmore was the kind of place where a wedding invitation was extended to practically the entire town. Mrs. Betty Patterson, who ran the general store, sat in the third pew wearing her best blue dress and a hat she had ordered specially from Austin. Sheriff Tom Bradley and his wife Carol took their seats near the back, Tom still wearing his badge because he was technically on duty. Though nothing ever happened in Whitmore that required urgent police attention, the church pianist, Mrs. Dorothy Evans, began playing gentle melodies as guests found their seats. She had taught piano lessons to half the town's children over the past 30 years, including Sarah, who had taken lessons for 5 years before focusing on her nursing studies. Dorothy's arthritic fingers weren't as nimble as they once were, but her heart poured into every note she played. Reverend Michael Davis, who had baptized both Sarah and Jake and had officiated at dozens of weddings in his 25 years serving Whitmore Community Church, stood at the altar reviewing his notes one final time. He had counseled the young couple through their engagement, and he had never seen two people more suited for each other. Their love was the kind that reminded him why he had chosen to serve God through serving others. As 3 o'clock approached, Jake took his position at the altar, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their slight trembling. He looked out at the assembled crowd, neighbors who had watched him grow up, customers who trusted him with their beloved animals, friends who had supported him through the challenging years of building his practice. This was his community, his home, and today he was marrying the woman who had made everything in his life make sense. The church doors opened, and Linda Mitchell appeared, looking radiant in a pale pink dress she had bought on sale 3 months earlier. She walked down the aisle to take her seat in the front pew, turning to give Jake an encouraging smile. Behind her, the wedding party began their procession. Marcus walked down the aisle with Sarah's maid of honor, her best friend since childhood, Amanda Foster. Amanda worked as a teacher at the local elementary school and had been Sarah's confidant through every milestone of her relationship with Jake. She wore a simple lavender dress that Sarah had chosen because it complemented Amanda's dark complexion and brought out her warm brown eyes. Then the music changed, and Dorothy Evans began playing "Here Comes the Bride." The congregation rose to their feet as Sarah appeared in the doorway, arm in arm with her father, Robert Mitchell. Robert had worked at the local grain elevator for 30 years, his hands rough from honest labor, his face weathered by the Texas sun. He had dreamed of this day since Sarah was born, though he had never imagined he would be quite so emotional when the moment finally arrived. Sarah looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her grandmother's dress fitting her perfectly, her smile bright enough to light up the entire church. But it was the look that passed between her and Jake that made several guests reach for their tissues. The love between them was so evident, so pure, that it seemed to fill the entire space with warmth. When Robert placed Sarah's hand in Jake's, he whispered, "Take care of my little girl, son." "I promise, sir," Jake replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll love her with everything I have." Reverend Davis began the ceremony with a reading from Corinthians about love being patient and kind. His words carried special weight in this small community where everyone had watched Jake and Sarah's relationship develop. As he spoke about the commitment they were making, not just to each other, but to their community, several guests nodded in agreement. In Whitmore, marriage wasn't just about two people. It was about the entire community supporting and celebrating love. The vows they had written themselves were simple but profound. Sarah spoke about finding in Jake not just a husband, but a best friend, someone who made her laugh every day and supported her dreams of eventually opening a free clinic for families who couldn't afford medical care. Jake's vows brought tears to many eyes as he promised to love Sarah through whatever challenges life might bring, to support her ambitions, and to dance with her in their kitchen for the rest of their lives. When Reverend Davis pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was met with thunderous applause, and more than a few whistles from Jake's college friends who had made the drive from Austin for the wedding. The reception in the church hall was everything Sarah had dreamed of: simple, joyful, and filled with love. Linda Mitchell and the other church ladies had outdone themselves with the food. There were platters of barbecued brisket that Tom Bradley had smoked for 12 hours, corn on the cob from the Patterson farm, homemade rolls that Mrs. Evans had baked that morning, and a towering chocolate cake that Amanda had decorated with wildflowers to match Sarah's bouquet. As the evening progressed, guests shared stories about the newlyweds. Eddie Martinez, Jake's secret guitar teacher, stood up to toast the couple. "I've known Jake since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past 3 years. Sarah, you've got yourself a good man here. And Jake, you'd better treat this angel right, or you'll have the whole town to answer to." The laughter that followed was warm and genuine. This was the beauty of small-town life. Everyone truly cared about everyone else, and celebrations like this reminded the community why they chose to stay in Whitmore despite the lure of bigger cities and greater opportunities. As the sun began to set through the hall's windows, casting golden light across the celebration, Jake caught Marcus's eye and nodded slightly. It was time for the surprise he had been planning for months. His heart pounded as he made his way to the front of the hall, where Eddie Martinez had quietly set up a microphone and guitar. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake began, his voice carrying across the hall as conversations gradually quieted, "I want to thank all of you for being here today to celebrate with Sarah and me. You're not just our friends and neighbors, you're our family, and having you here means the world to us." Sarah looked puzzled as Jake picked up the guitar. She had no idea he had been taking lessons, and she watched with growing curiosity as he adjusted the microphone stand. "Sarah," Jake continued, his eyes finding hers across the room, 3 years ago, you told me that music was the language of the heart, and that Garth Brooks sang the words you could never find yourself. Well, I'm not Garth Brooks, and I'm certainly not much of a singer, but I wanted to try to speak your language tonight." The recognition dawned on Sarah's face as Jake began the opening chords of "The Dance." Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears immediately sprang to her eyes. Around the room, guests began to realize what was happening, and a hush fell over the celebration. Jake's voice was far from professional, but it was filled with so much love and sincerity that every person in that room felt the emotion behind every word. He sang about looking back on his life and the choices he had made, about being grateful for the dance even if the music might someday end. His eyes never left Sarah's face as he sang, and everyone present could see that he was singing not just her favorite song, but the story of their love. When he reached the chorus, several guests began to hum along, and by the final verse, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Sarah was crying openly, her hands pressed to her heart, completely overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness and effort Jake had put into this surprise. As the last chord faded, the room erupted in applause. Sarah rushed to Jake, throwing her arms around him as he set down the guitar. "How long have you been planning this?" she whispered in his ear. "Since the day you said yes to marrying me," Jake replied, holding her close. I wanted to give you something special, something that would show you how much I love you." "It's perfect," Sarah said, pulling back to look into his eyes. "You're perfect." As the couple shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying slowly to a recorded version of The Dance that Dorothy Evans played from the borrowed sound system, everyone in the room felt that they had witnessed something truly special. This wasn't just a wedding reception. It was a celebration of the kind of love that made everyone present believe in the power of commitment, sacrifice, and the beauty of two people choosing to build a life together. The evening continued with more dancing, more stories, and more laughter. Children ran between the tables while their parents reminisced about their own weddings and young love. Elderly couples danced slowly to songs that reminded them of their courtship, and single guests watched with hope that they might someday find the kind of love that Sarah and Jake shared. As the night drew to a close, guests began to say their goodbyes. Linda Mitchell hugged her new son-in-law tightly, whispering, "Thank you for making my daughter so happy. Thank you for raising such an incredible woman." Jake replied, meaning every word. Sarah and Jake spent the last hour of their reception helping to clean up, because that's the kind of people they were: thoughtful, grateful, and always willing to help others. As they stacked chairs and gathered centerpieces, they were surrounded by friends and family who insisted they shouldn't be working on their wedding day, but who appreciated that they were the type of couple who would never ask others to do something they weren't willing to do themselves. As they finally left the church hall, Sarah carrying her bouquet and Jake carrying a box of leftover cake that Linda had insisted they take home, they walked to Jake's truck under a canopy of stars. The October night was cool but comfortable, and the silence between them was filled with contentment. "Mrs. Thompson," Jake said as he helped Sarah into the truck, savoring the sound of her new name. "I like the sound of that," Sarah replied, settling into the passenger seat that had become as familiar as her own home over the past 3 years. As they drove through the quiet streets of Whitmore toward their small house on Maple Street, a modest 2-bedroom home that Jake had bought the previous year in preparation for their marriage, Sarah reflected on the day. It had been everything she had dreamed of and more. The simplicity, the love, the community support, and especially Jake's surprise performance had made it perfect. "Jake," she said softly, as they pulled into their driveway, "thank you for today, for everything. I know we don't have a lot of money for fancy things, but I wouldn't change a single thing about today." "Not even my singing?" Jake asked with a laugh, remembering how nervous he had been during his performance. "Especially not your singing," Sarah replied, reaching over to take his hand. "That was the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me." As they walked into their home as husband and wife for the first time, neither of them could have imagined that their simple, heartfelt wedding day was about to become the foundation for a story that would eventually touch hearts far beyond the borders of Whitmore, Texas. Sometimes the most extraordinary moments grow from the most ordinary expressions of love. And Sarah and Jake's wedding day was proof that magic doesn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it just requires one person loving another so much that they're willing to step outside their comfort zone to create a perfect moment. 3 weeks after the wedding, Sarah and Jake had settled into married life with the easy contentment of two people who had been meant for each other all along. Their daily routines hadn't changed much. Sarah still left for her shifts at Whitmore General Hospital at 6 in the morning, and Jake still made his rounds to the local ranches, caring for everything from prize bulls to beloved family dogs. But there was something magical about coming home to each other every evening, about sharing meals at their small kitchen table, and about falling asleep each night knowing they were exactly where they belonged. The wedding had become a favorite topic of conversation throughout Whitmore. At Patterson's General Store, customers lingered longer than necessary. eager to share their favorite moments from the celebration. Mrs. Betty Patterson, who had never been one to gossip but couldn't resist sharing heartwarming stories, found herself telling everyone about Jake's surprise performance. "You should have seen Sarah's face," Betty told her customers, her eyes lighting up with the memory. That girl was glowing brighter than a Christmas tree. And Jake, bless his heart, was so nervous his hands were shaking, but he sang every word like his life depended on it. The story had particular resonance because everyone in town knew how hard Jake had worked to afford even their modest wedding. He had taken on extra emergency calls, worked weekends without complaint, and had even picked up part-time work, helping Tom Bradley with some construction projects around town. The fact that he had also found time to secretly learn guitar made his gesture even more touching. Amanda Foster, Sarah's maid of honor, had been particularly moved by the wedding. As an elementary school teacher, she was accustomed to being around children who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. But Jake and Sarah's love story had reminded her that real-life romance could be even more beautiful than fiction. She found herself sharing the story with her fellow teachers during lunch breaks. "It wasn't just the singing," Amanda explained to her colleague Jennifer Walsh as they sat in the school cafeteria. "It was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world, and the way everyone in that room just felt so much love. It was like being inside a Norman Rockwell painting." Jennifer, who taught 4th grade and had recently gone through a difficult divorce, found herself wiping away tears. "That sounds incredible. I'm so happy for Sarah. She deserves all the happiness in the world." What none of them realized was that their story was about to reach far beyond Whitmore, thanks to a guest who had been quietly documenting the evening. Marcus Rodriguez had brought his girlfriend, Lisa Chen, to the wedding. Lisa worked as a freelance photographer and had offered to take photos of the celebration as her wedding gift to Jake and Sarah. She had captured every moment of the evening, from Sarah's radiant smile as she walked down the aisle to the tears in guests' eyes during Jake's performance. Lisa was also active on social media, where she shared her photography work and documented life in rural Texas. The wedding photos she had taken were too beautiful not to share, and with Sarah and Jake's permission, she created a post that would change everything. "Sometimes you witness something so pure and beautiful that it restores your faith in love," Lisa wrote as the caption for a photo of Jake singing to Sarah, the guitar in his hands and absolute adoration on his face as he looked at his new wife. "Last weekend, I watched a veterinarian who had secretly learned guitar surprise his nurse wife by singing her favorite Garth Brooks song at their wedding reception. It wasn't perfect singing, it was something better. It was perfect love." Lisa's post was accompanied by several photos. Jake at the microphone with his guitar, Sarah's face glowing with surprise and joy, and a wide shot of the entire reception hall with every guest completely captivated by the moment. The final photo showed Sarah and Jake dancing to the recorded version of The Dance immediately after his performance, lost in their own world while surrounded by their loving community. Within hours of posting, the photos began to be shared. Lisa's friends, touched by the story, shared it with their networks. The combination of the heartwarming story, the beautiful photos, and the connection to Garth Brooks began to create a perfect storm of viral content. By the next morning, Lisa's post had been shared over 1,000 times. Comments poured in from strangers who were moved by the story. "This is what real love looks like. I'm crying happy tears at work. Thank you for sharing this beautiful moment. This reminds me why I still believe in true love. That man learned guitar for his wife. This is the most romantic thing I've ever seen." Sarah first learned about the viral post when she arrived at work that Tuesday morning. The hospital's receptionist, Margaret Thompson, no relation to Jake despite the shared surname, was a woman in her 50s who spent her lunch breaks scrolling through social media on her phone. "Sarah, honey, you need to see this," Margaret called out as Sarah walked through the emergency room doors. "That friend of Marcus's posted photos from your wedding, and they're everywhere." Sarah looked at Margaret's phone screen with growing amazement. The numbers kept climbing: shares, comments, likes, all from people she had never met who were somehow touched by her and Jake's story. "Margaret, I don't understand. Why would strangers care about our wedding?" Sarah asked, though she was secretly thrilled that their special day was bringing joy to others. "Honey, in a world full of bad news, people are hungry for stories like yours," Margaret explained. "You and Jake represent something real and beautiful. People need to be reminded that love like yours still exists." Throughout the day, Sarah found herself checking the post whenever she had a spare moment. The story had been picked up by several lifestyle blogs and local news stations in Texas. A reporter from Austin had even called Lisa, asking for more details about the wedding and the couple. When Sarah got home that evening, she found Jake sitting at their kitchen table with his laptop open, looking slightly overwhelmed. "Sarah, I think we need to talk," Jake said, gesturing to the screen. "Lisa's post about our wedding has been shared by thousands of people. There are news articles about us. Someone even started a hashtag, #AskJake and Sarah Dance." Sarah sat down beside her husband, reading through some of the comments and articles. Most were overwhelmingly positive, celebrating their love story and Jake's romantic gesture. But the attention was something neither of them had expected or necessarily wanted. "How do you feel about all this?" Sarah asked, taking Jake's hand. "Honestly, it's a little scary," Jake admitted. I'm proud that people think our love story is special, because it is special to me. But I didn't sing to you that night for thousands of strangers. I sang to you because I love you and wanted to make you happy. And you did make me happy," Sarah assured him. "The happiest I've ever been. But Jake, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe our story can inspire other people to show love in their own lives." That night, they decided to embrace the unexpected attention while staying true to themselves. They wouldn't seek out publicity, but they would graciously accept the joy their story was bringing to others. The next few days brought even more surprises. A country music blog with over 1 million followers had picked up the story, and the post garnered attention from several celebrities who shared it on their own social media accounts. A morning talk show in Dallas called asking if they would be interested in appearing as guests to tell their story. "We appreciate the interest," Jake told the producer politely, "but we're just regular people living our lives. We're not looking to be celebrities." Sarah supported his decision completely. They had built their relationship on authenticity and simplicity, and they didn't want fame to change that. However, they did agree to a brief interview with the local newspaper, the Whitmore Weekly, because they felt their community deserved to hear their side of the story. The interview took place at their kitchen table, the same table where they shared breakfast every morning and dinner every evening. Reporter David Kim, a young journalist who had recently moved to Texas from California, was charmed by their home and their easy rapport with each other. "What's it been like having your wedding go viral?" David asked, his notebook ready. "Surreal," Sarah laughed. "I keep getting friend requests from people I've never met. My aunt in Oklahoma called because her neighbor saw our story on Facebook. It's wild, but also really heartwarming," Jake added. People have been sharing their own love stories in the comments. One woman wrote about how our story inspired her husband to learn piano so he could play their wedding song for their anniversary. Another person said they were going through a difficult time, and seeing our photos reminded them that good things still happen in the world. David found himself genuinely moved by the couple's humility and grace. "Do you have any regrets about the attention?" None at all, Sarah said firmly. If our happiness can make other people happy, then I think that's a wonderful thing. Love should be celebrated. And if our story encourages other people to be more romantic or more grateful for their relationships, then I'm honored that we could play a part in that. The article David wrote captured not just the facts of their viral story, but the essence of who Sarah and Jake were as people and as a couple. It was picked up by several larger publications, further spreading their story. But the most significant development was still to come. Among the thousands of people who had been touched by Sarah and Jake's story was someone who had the power to create an even more magical moment. 2 weeks after the story first went viral, Lisa Chen received a message that made her heart skip a beat. The message came through her photography business's Facebook page, and the sender was someone she never could have imagined would see her photos. "Hi Lisa," the message read. "I'm reaching out about the beautiful wedding photos and story you shared about Jake and Sarah Thompson. My team and I were incredibly moved by their love story and Jake's surprise performance. I wonder if you might be able to help us get in touch with the couple. We'd love to discuss a surprise that might be even bigger than the one Jake planned for Sarah. Please call me at your earliest convenience. Kevin." Lisa read the message 3 times before it fully sank in. She immediately called Marcus, who confirmed that the message was legitimate and not some elaborate prank. "Lisa, you need to call that number right now," Marcus said, his voice filled with excitement. This could be incredible for Jake and Sarah. When Lisa made the call, she found herself speaking with Kevin, who explained that he worked closely with a major country music star who had been deeply touched by Sarah and Jake's story. The star wanted to do something special for the couple, but wanted to keep it a surprise. "We've been following their story, and we know they turned down television appearances because they want to stay private," Kevin explained. "We respect that completely. This wouldn't be about publicity or making them famous. This would just be about creating a beautiful moment for 2 people who clearly deserve it." Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes as Kevin outlined the plan. It was ambitious, it was generous, and it was exactly the kind of gesture that would mean the world to Sarah and Jake without compromising their values. "How can I help?" Lisa asked, already knowing she would do whatever it took to make this happen. Over the next several days, Lisa worked with Kevin to coordinate the surprise. They brought in Marcus and Amanda as co-conspirators, knowing they would need people close to the couple to help make everything work seamlessly. The plan was ambitious. They would arrange for Sarah and Jake to attend what they thought was a small community event celebrating their viral fame. The event would be held at the Whitmore Community Center, with most of the town invited. What Sarah and Jake wouldn't know until they arrived was that they were about to experience something that would make Jake's guitar performance seem like just the beginning of their incredible love story. As the plans came together, everyone involved felt the excitement building. This wasn't just about creating a viral moment or generating publicity. This was about celebrating 2 people whose authentic love had touched hearts around the world, and giving them a gift that honored the beauty of their relationship. Sarah and Jake, blissfully unaware of the surprise being planned, continued their normal routines. They had adapted to the occasional recognition from strangers who had seen their story online, but they remained focused on their work, their community, and each other. They had no idea that their simple love story was about to intersect with country music royalty in a way that would create memories to last a lifetime. The stage was set for something truly extraordinary, and everyone involved knew they were about to witness the kind of moment that reminded people why love stories matter and why acts of kindness and generosity could change lives forever. The call came on a Thursday morning, while Jake was examining a sick calf at the Henderson Ranch. His phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, but he ignored it, focusing on the young animal that seemed to be struggling with a respiratory infection. By the time he finished his examination and prescribed treatment, he had 3 missed calls from Amanda Foster. "Jake, you need to call me back immediately," Amanda's voicemail said, her voice barely containing excitement. "It's about you and Sarah, and it's important. Really, really important." When Jake called back, Amanda answered on the first ring. "Jake, where are you right now? Are you somewhere private where you can talk?" Amanda asked, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement. "I'm in my truck outside the Henderson place." "Amanda, what's going on?" "You're scaring me a little," Jake replied, settling back in his driver's seat. "Okay, I need you to promise me that what I'm about to tell you stays between us until I say otherwise. You cannot tell Sarah. You cannot tell your parents. You cannot tell anyone. Promise me, Jake." Jake's concern deepened, but Amanda's excitement was infectious. "I promise. What's happening?" "Lisa got a call yesterday from someone who works with Garth Brooks," Amanda said, then paused for Jake's reaction. The silence stretched for several seconds before Jake found his voice. "Amanda, that's not funny. Don't joke about something like that." "I'm not joking, Jake. I swear on my grandmother's grave, I am not joking. Garth Brooks heard about your wedding, saw the video of you singing the dance, and he wants to surprise Sarah. In person. At a special event here in Whitmore." Jake pulled his truck over to the side of the road, his hands shaking slightly. Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. Lisa spoke with his management team yesterday, and they want to plan something special. But Jake, they want it to be a complete surprise for Sarah. They know you two aren't interested in fame or publicity. They've been following the interviews you've done, and they respect that. This isn't about making you famous. This is about honoring your love story and giving Sarah a moment she'll never forget." Jake sat in stunned silence, trying to process what Amanda was telling him. Garth Brooks, the man whose music had provided the soundtrack to his and Sarah's relationship, whose songs Sarah sang while getting ready for work every morning, whose concert Sarah had dreamed of attending but could never afford tickets to, wanted to surprise his wife. "What? What do they want to do?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They want to organize a community celebration at the community center. Everyone in town would be invited, and we'd tell Sarah it's just the town wanting to celebrate her and your story going viral. She'll think it's just a nice community event with cake and maybe some speeches, but when she gets there, Garth Brooks will be there," Jake finished, his mind reeling. "Not just there, Jake. They want him to perform. For Sarah. For your whole community. They want to create something beautiful." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. He thought about Sarah's face when she listened to Garth Brooks' music, the way she would close her eyes and get lost in the lyrics. He thought about all the times she had said that if she could meet any person in the world, it would be Garth Brooks, because his music had helped her through difficult times and had been the soundtrack to so many of their important moments. "How is this even possible?" Jake asked. "Why would he do this for us?" According to Lisa, when his team showed him the video of you singing the dance at your wedding, he was really moved. He said it reminded him why he writes music, to be part of people's love stories. He wanted to do something to honor that. Over the next hour, Amanda explained the plan that was taking shape. Garth Brooks would fly in privately to a small airfield about an hour from Whitmore. He would arrive at the community center after Sarah and Jake were already there, making his entrance as a complete surprise. He would perform several songs, including The Dance, and create a moment that would be filmed for Sarah and Jake to keep, but not for public distribution unless they wanted it to be. The best part, Amanda continued, is that his team wants to make sure this stays about you and Sarah and your community. They're not bringing cameras, crews, or trying to turn it into a media event. This is just about creating something beautiful for two people whose love story touched his heart. Jake was quiet for a long time, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. Finally, he spoke. "Amanda, this is going to mean everything to Sarah. Everything. She's going to completely lose her mind." "I know," Amanda laughed. "That's why we have to make sure this stays secret. Can you imagine if she found out beforehand? She'd be so nervous she wouldn't be able to enjoy it." They spent the next 30 minutes discussing logistics. The event would be planned for the following Saturday, just 10 days away. That would give Garth Brooks's team time to coordinate travel and sound equipment, while giving the local conspirators time to spread the word about the community celebration without arousing Sarah's suspicion. Amanda would handle inviting the townspeople, presenting it as a simple celebration of Jake and Sarah's viral story. Marcus would coordinate with Lisa and Garth Brooks' team on the technical aspects: sound equipment, staging, and the star's arrival. Jake's job would be the most challenging. He had to act completely normal around Sarah while keeping the biggest secret of his life. The next few days tested Jake's acting abilities to their limits. Every time Sarah mentioned Garth Brooks, which happened frequently, given the connection to their wedding story, Jake had to fight to keep his expression neutral. When she wondered aloud whether they might ever be able to afford concert tickets, Jake nearly broke down and told her everything. "You know what's funny?" Sarah said over dinner on Friday night, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "All this attention from our wedding has made me think about how much Garth Brooks' music has meant to us. I mean, without the dance, we might never have had that first kiss." Jake nearly choked on his water. "What do you mean?" "Remember? We were in your truck after our third date, and that song came on the radio. I started singing along, and you said you'd never heard anyone sing with such passion. That's when you kissed me for the first time." Sarah smiled at the memory. "Sometimes I think about writing him a letter, just to thank him for creating music that became such a big part of our love story." That's a really nice idea," Jake managed, his heart pounding. "Maybe you should do that." Meanwhile, the preparations for Saturday's surprise were proceeding at breakneck speed. Kevin, Garth Brooks's tour manager, had arrived in Whitmore on Thursday to oversee the logistics. He was a soft-spoken man in his 40s who had been working with country music stars for over 20 years. But he had never been involved in anything quite like this. Usually, when we do surprise appearances, it's for publicity, or as part of a larger tour. Kevin explained to Marcus as they met at the community center to assess the space. This is different. Garth was genuinely moved by Jake and Sarah's story, and he wants to create something special for them without any ulterior motives. The community center had to be transformed quickly and quietly. Kevin's team brought in professional sound equipment and lighting, but they did it in a way that wouldn't seem too elaborate for what Sarah thought was just a community celebration. They set up a small stage at one end of the room, with speakers positioned to create the best possible acoustics for Garth's performance. Eddie Martinez, Jake's guitar teacher, was brought into the conspiracy because his music shop was being used as a staging area for some of the equipment. When Kevin explained what was happening, Eddie's eyes filled with tears. "That boy worked so hard to learn that song," Eddie said, shaking his head in amazement. "He came in here every day after work, his hands rough from working with animals all day, and he'd practice until his fingers bled. All because he wanted to make his bride happy. And now, Garth Brooks himself wants to honor that." "That's exactly why we're doing this," Kevin replied. Garth said that Jake's performance reminded him why he became a musician in the first place, to be part of people's most important moments. Linda Mitchell, Sarah's mother, was perhaps the most emotional conspirator. When Amanda finally told her what was being planned, Linda broke down completely. "My Sarah has been through so much," Linda said through her tears. Her father and we could never give her the fancy things other kids had. She worked so hard to put herself through nursing school, and she spent her whole life taking care of other people. She deserves something magical, something just for her. She's going to get it, Mrs. Mitchell, Amanda assured her. This is going to be the most magical day of her life. The plan for Saturday was carefully choreographed. The community celebration was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock. Sarah and Jake would arrive thinking they were attending a simple reception with cake and speeches from their neighbors. Garth Brooks would arrive at the private airfield at 1:30 and be driven directly to the community center, entering through the back door while everyone was gathered in the main hall. Friday night, Jake barely slept. He lay in bed next to Sarah, listening to her peaceful breathing and trying to imagine her reaction when she saw Garth Brooks walk onto that small stage. Every time he started to drift off, excitement would jolt him awake again. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of perfect October weather that made Texas feel like paradise. Sarah woke up in a good mood, looking forward to what she thought would be a nice afternoon celebrating with their community. "I can't believe the whole town wants to throw us a party," Sarah said as she got dressed, choosing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. "It's so sweet of everyone." "Yeah, it really is," Jake agreed, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. His hands were shaking with nervous energy. "Jake, are you okay? You seem really anxious," Sarah observed, studying her husband's face with the trained eye of someone who had spent 5 years reading people's symptoms. "Just, I don't love being the center of attention," Jake said, which was technically true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. At 1 o'clock, Amanda called to say she was picking them up. "Are you two ready for your big celebration?" she asked when they got in her car. "I think so," Sarah laughed, "though I still can't believe people want to make such a fuss about us." As they drove through town toward the community center, Sarah noticed that there seemed to be more cars on the streets than usual for a Saturday afternoon. "Looks like half the county is here today," she commented. "Word travels fast in small towns," Amanda replied, exchanging a meaningful look with Jake in the rearview mirror. When they pulled up to the community center, Sarah could see that the parking lot was indeed packed. Cars from neighboring towns filled every available space, and people were walking toward the building from all directions. "Wow, this is bigger than I expected," Sarah said, smoothing down her dress nervously. Inside the community center, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Nearly 300 people had gathered, not just from Whitmore, but from surrounding communities who had heard about the celebration and wanted to be part of it. What they didn't know was that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Reverend Davis welcomed Sarah and Jake as they entered, giving Jake a subtle nod that indicated everything was proceeding according to plan. "Welcome to your celebration," he said warmly. "Your whole community is here to honor you." Sarah was overwhelmed by the turnout. She saw faces she recognized, and many she didn't, all of them beaming with excitement that seemed disproportionate to the occasion. Mrs. Patterson from the general store hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're in for such a treat, honey." For 30 minutes, Sarah and Jake mingled with the crowd, accepting congratulations and thanks for sharing their love story with the world. Several people mentioned how much their story had meant to them personally, and Sarah felt genuinely moved by the impact their simple wedding had apparently had on so many lives. At exactly 2:30, Amanda stepped up to the small microphone that had been set up at the front of the room. The crowd quickly quieted, and Sarah noticed that everyone seemed to be barely containing their excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda began, "we're here today to celebrate Jake and Sarah Thompson, whose beautiful love story has touched hearts around the world. Their wedding reminded all of us what real love looks like, and we wanted to gather as a community to honor that." The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and Sarah felt herself blushing. Jake stood beside her, his arm around her waist, and she could feel that he was trembling slightly. "Sarah," Amanda continued, "your friends and neighbors have been so moved by your story. And by the way, Jake surprised you with that beautiful performance of the dance at your wedding reception. We thought it was only fitting that today's celebration include a little music of our own." "Dutatuandi." Sarah smiled, expecting perhaps that Eddie Martinez would play guitar or that someone would sing a song in their honor. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever. "So," Amanda said, her voice now barely containing her excitement, "we'd like to present a very special surprise for a very special couple." The back door of the community center opened, and a tall figure in a cowboy hat and simple jeans and button-down shirt walked through the crowd toward the small stage. For a moment, Sarah didn't process what she was seeing. The man looked familiar, but her brain couldn't quite make the connection. Then he reached the microphone, tipped his hat to the crowd, and said in that unmistakable voice, "Good afternoon, Whitmore. I'm Garth Brooks, and I'm here because I heard about a young veterinarian who learned guitar to surprise his bride, and I just had to meet them." The sound that came from Sarah's throat was barely human. Her hands flew to her mouth, her knees buckled, and if Jake hadn't been holding her, she would have collapsed to the floor. The entire room erupted in cheers and applause, but Sarah heard none of it over the pounding of her own heart. "Sarah! Sarah! Are you okay?" Jake asked, though he was grinning so widely his face hurt. Sarah couldn't speak. She could only stare at the stage where her musical hero, the man whose songs had been the soundtrack to her life, whose music had carried her through difficult times and celebrated her happiest moments, was standing in her tiny hometown's community center, smiling directly at her. "Jake and Sarah Thompson," Garth said into the microphone, "would you come up here, please?" Somehow, with Jake's help and Amanda pushing gently from behind, Sarah found herself walking toward the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The crowd parted before them, everyone grinning and many crying with joy at Sarah's reaction. When they reached the stage, Garth stepped down to meet them at ground level. He was even taller than Sarah had imagined, and his presence filled the room with the kind of charisma that made it clear why he was one of the biggest stars in the world. But his handshake was warm and genuine, his smile was kind, and when he spoke to them, it was with the warmth of someone talking to old friends. "Sarah," Garth said, "I have to tell you, when my team showed me the video of Jake singing The Dance at your wedding, it just about broke my heart, in the best possible way. That's why I write music, to be part of moments like that." Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I can't believe you're here. I can't believe this is real." "It's real," Garth laughed, "and it's my honor to be here. Jake, I understand you learned guitar specifically to surprise Sarah with that song?" "Yes, sir," Jake replied, still somewhat stunned by the surreal nature of the situation. "It took me 6 months of lessons with Eddie Martinez here in town. Sarah loves your music more than anything, and I wanted to give her something special. Well, I think what you gave her was pretty incredible," Garth said, "but I was hoping I could return the favor. Sarah, would you like to hear some music?" Sarah could only nod, tears streaming down her face. Garth stepped back onto the small stage and picked up an acoustic guitar that had been waiting for him. The community center fell completely silent, except for the sound of Sarah's quiet crying and the rustle of 300 people holding their breath. "This first song," Garth said, "is for everyone who believes in the power of love to create magic in ordinary moments." He began to play The Dance, and the first chord sent shivers through every person in the room. But this wasn't just any performance of the song. This was Garth Brooks, in an intimate setting, playing for an audience of people who understood exactly why this moment mattered. As he sang the familiar lyrics about looking back on life and being grateful for the dance even if the music might end, Sarah felt like she was living in a dream. This song had been playing during her first kiss with Jake, had been the soundtrack to their courtship, and had been Jake's gift to her at their wedding. Now, the man who had written it was singing it directly to her, in her hometown, surrounded by everyone she loved. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous, but Garth wasn't finished. "Sarah, Jake told me that this next song has special meaning for you too," he said, beginning the opening chords of "Friends in Low Places." The crowd immediately began singing along, and Sarah found herself swept up in the magic of the moment. Here she was, in the Whitmore Community Center, singing along with Garth Brooks while her husband held her hand, and her entire community celebrated around them. Garth performed 5 songs in total, each one chosen for its connection to love, community, and the beauty of simple moments. Between songs, he told stories about his own life, about the importance of small towns like Whitmore, and about why Jake and Sarah's story had moved him so deeply. "You know," Garth said, as he prepared for his final song, "I've played in arenas with 50,000 people, and I've had some incredible experiences in my career. But this, being here with all of you, celebrating the kind of love that Jake and Sarah represent, this is what music is really about. This is why I do what I do." For his final song, he chose Unanswered Prayers, explaining that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never could have imagined for ourselves. "Jake and Sarah, I bet when you got married 3 weeks ago, you never imagined that your love story would touch so many hearts, or that it would bring us all together today. But that's the beauty of love. It has a way of creating magic we never saw coming." When the final song ended, Garth set down his guitar and stepped off the stage to embrace Sarah and Jake once more. Sarah was crying so hard she could barely breathe, overwhelmed by the incredible generosity of what had just happened. "Thank you," she whispered to Garth. "Thank you for the most amazing day of my life. Thank you for reminding me why I love what I do." Garth replied, "Your love story is beautiful. And Jake, that performance at your wedding was one of the most touching things I've ever seen. Keep taking care of each other." As Garth prepared to leave, he had to fly back to Nashville that evening for another commitment. He made sure to greet as many community members as possible, thanking them for their hospitality and for being part of such a special day. The celebration continued for hours after Garth's departure, but the mood had shifted from excitement to something deeper. A sense of having witnessed something truly magical, something that none of them would ever forget. Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon in a daze, accepting congratulations and hugs from friends and neighbors, all while trying to process what had just happened. Jake stayed close by her side, watching her face and feeling overwhelmed by gratitude for everyone who had made this surprise possible. As they finally prepared to leave that evening, Sarah turned to take one last look at the community center where her life had just been changed forever. "Jake," she said softly, "how did I get so lucky? How did I end up with a husband who would learn guitar for me, and friends who would arrange something like this, and a life filled with so much love? I ask myself the same question every day," Jake replied, pulling her close. "I think we just got really, really lucky." What neither of them knew was that their story was far from over, and that the magical afternoon at the Whitmore Community Center was just the beginning of the impact their love story would have on the world. The drive home from the community center passed in a blur of emotion and disbelief. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Amanda's car, clutching Jake's hand and occasionally breaking into fresh tears, as the reality of what had just happened continued to wash over her. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Sarah said for the fourth time. "Garth Brooks was really there. He really sang the dance for us. That really happened, right?" "It really happened," Jake confirmed, squeezing her hand. He was still processing the afternoon himself, though his amazement was mixed with the satisfaction of having successfully kept the secret. Seeing Sarah's joy had made every moment of nervous anticipation worthwhile. "How long have you known?" Sarah asked, turning to study her husband's face. "Jake Thompson, you are the worst liar in the world, and there's no way you just found out about this today." Jake laughed, caught. "Amanda called me on Thursday. I've been dying to tell you for 3 days." 3 days? You kept this secret for 3 days? Sarah's voice rose in amazement. "How did you not explode?" "I almost did about 6 times, Jake admitted. "Especially when you were talking about writing Garth a letter to thank him for his music. I nearly told you that you could thank him in person." Amanda pulled into their driveway and turned to face the couple in her back seat. "So, how was it? Was it everything you dreamed it would be?" Sarah's face crumpled again, and she reached forward to hug her best friend tightly. "Amanda? I don't even have words. How did you organize all of this? How did you make this happen?" "It wasn't just me," Amanda said, returning the hug. "Lisa's post about your wedding caught the attention of Garth's team, and they reached out to her. When they said they wanted to do something special for you two, we all just jumped in to help make it happen. Your whole community was involved." They spent another 30 minutes in the driveway, replaying every moment of the afternoon. Sarah wanted to remember every detail. The way Garth had looked when he first walked through that door, the sound of his voice when he spoke directly to her, the feeling of being in the same room with someone whose music had shaped so much of her life. "The way he sang the dance," Sarah said, shaking her head in wonder. "It was like he was singing it just for us, like he understood exactly what that song means to our relationship." "That's because he did understand," Jake said. "When I talked to him afterward, he said that seeing the video of me singing it at our wedding reminded him why he writes music, to become part of people's love stories." As they finally went into their house, Sarah felt like she was seeing everything with new eyes. Their simple home, their modest furnishings, their quiet life together. It all felt touched by magic now. She couldn't stop smiling, couldn't stop replaying the afternoon in her mind. "Jake," she said as they got ready for bed, "I need you to know something. Today was incredible. More incredible than anything I could have imagined. But what made it perfect wasn't just meeting Garth Brooks. It was sharing it with you, and knowing that you made it happen, because you love me that much." "You would have done the same thing for me," Jake replied, pulling her into his arms. "That's what love is, wanting to create magic for each other." Meanwhile, across town, the other conspirators were having their own emotional debriefs. Amanda sat in her apartment, scrolling through the photos Lisa had taken during the surprise, still hardly believing they had pulled it off. Marcus called from Austin, where he had driven immediately after the event. "Amanda, I've been to a lot of concerts in my life, but I have never seen anything like what happened today. When Garth walked through that door and Sarah just collapsed, I got chills." "I know," Amanda replied. "I was standing right behind her, and I could feel her whole body shaking. She couldn't even stand up on her own. And the way he performed, it wasn't like a regular concert. It was intimate, personal. He really got what this meant to them." Lisa Chen was already editing the photos and videos she had captured, creating a private album for Sarah and Jake to keep. As she worked, she kept pausing to wipe away tears. Through her lens, she had captured not just the event, but the raw emotion on every face in the room. The photo that would become her favorite showed the exact moment when Garth first began singing the dance. Sarah's face was a portrait of pure joy and disbelief. Jake's arm was around her waist as he watched her reaction with obvious love. And in the background, 300 people were all focused on the magic unfolding before them. But perhaps the most emotional reaction came from Linda Mitchell, Sarah's mother. She sat in her small living room, calling her sister in Oklahoma to share what had happened. "Betty, you're not going to believe what happened to my Sarah today," Linda said, her voice thick with tears. "You know how her wedding story went viral? Well, Garth Brooks. Yes, that Garth Brooks. He flew here to surprise her. He performed a whole concert just for her and Jake." "Linda, are you pulling my leg?" Betty asked. "I swear on Mama's grave, I'm not lying. I watched my daughter meet her hero today, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She deserves this, Betty. After everything she's been through, all the times we couldn't afford to give her what other kids had, she finally got something magical." The story of Garth's surprise appearance spread quickly, but this time it was different from the viral wedding story. The people who had been there felt protective of what they had witnessed. It had been too special, too personal, to turn into mere social media content. Lisa posted a single photo, a wide shot of the community center with Garth on stage and the crowd gathered around Sarah and Jake, with a simple caption, "Sometimes magic happens in small towns. Sometimes love stories get fairy tale endings." Today was one of those days. The post received thousands of likes and comments, but the focus remained on celebrating love rather than seeking fame. Comments poured in from people who were moved by the story. This is what humanity looks like at its best. Faith in love restored. These are the stories the world needs to hear. National media outlets reached out, wanting to interview Sarah and Jake about meeting Garth Brooks. But the couple politely declined most requests. They agreed to one interview with a country music magazine, but only because they wanted to thank Garth publicly for his incredible generosity. "We're not interested in being celebrities," Sarah told the interviewer. "We're just regular people who got incredibly lucky. Garth Brooks didn't do this for publicity. He did it out of pure kindness. And we want people to know what a generous, genuine person he is." A week after the surprise, Sarah returned to work at Whitmore General Hospital to find that her story had inspired changes there too. Margaret Thompson, the receptionist, had created a love story wall where staff members could share photos and stories of their own romantic moments. "Sarah, honey, you've reminded all of us that love is worth celebrating," Margaret explained. "We see so much sadness and sickness here at the hospital. Your story has brought joy into this place, and we needed that." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the hospital's chief of staff, approached Sarah during her lunch break. "Sarah, I want you to know that your story has had an impact beyond just entertainment. 3 couples have gotten engaged in the past week, and they've all mentioned being inspired by you and Jake. One of them said that seeing your love story made them realize they didn't want to wait any longer to commit to each other." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the ripple effects of their story. "Dr. Walsh, Jake and I never expected any of this. We just wanted to have a nice wedding and build a good life together. And that's exactly why your story resonates with people," Dr. Walsh replied. "In a world full of artificial everything, you two represent something real and authentic. Don't underestimate the power of that." The impact extended beyond Whitmore as well. Eddie Martinez, Jake's guitar teacher, found his music shop busier than it had ever been. Men from all over the region were coming in, wanting to learn guitar to surprise their wives or girlfriends. "It's been incredible," Eddie told Jake when he stopped by to thank his former teacher for his role in the surprise. "I've had guys drive 2 hours just to take lessons here because they heard this is where you learn to play the dance." They all want to create their own romantic surprises. That's amazing, Jake said, genuinely moved. I had no idea that our story would inspire other people to be more romantic. Son, you started something special, Eddie replied. Love is contagious, and when people see it in its purest form, it makes them want to love better too. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was on Sarah and Jake themselves. The surprise had reinforced something they already knew but hadn't fully articulated: that their love story mattered not just to them, but to their community and beyond. Jake, Sarah said one evening as they sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and pink. I've been thinking about what Garth said, about love creating magic we never saw coming. What about it? I think he was right, but not in the way I first understood it. The magic isn't just that we went viral or that we met our hero. The magic is that, by just loving each other authentically, we somehow made other people believe in love more. We made people want to be more romantic, more grateful for what they have. Jake nodded thoughtfully. It's like our love story gave other people permission to believe in fairy tale endings again. Exactly. And I think that comes with a responsibility. Not to be perfect or to be celebrities, but to keep being authentic. To keep showing people what real, everyday love looks like. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the sky change colors. Tomorrow, Jake would return to caring for animals, and Sarah would return to caring for patients. They would continue living their quiet, purposeful life in Whitmore, Texas. But they would do so knowing that their love story had touched hearts around the world, that it had inspired other couples to love more boldly, and that sometimes the most extraordinary magic comes from the most ordinary moments shared between two people who choose each other every single day. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sarah squeezed Jake's hand. Ready for whatever comes next, Mr. Thompson. With you, I'm ready for anything, Mrs. Thompson. Neither of them could have known that their story was about to inspire one more beautiful surprise, one that would close the circle of their viral love story in the most perfect way possible. 6 months after Garth Brooks' surprise appearance in Whitmore, Sarah and Jake had settled back into the rhythm of their normal lives. Though normal now included occasional recognition from strangers and frequent updates from friends about people their story had inspired. They had turned down dozens of interview requests, a book deal, and even a Hallmark movie offer, preferring to keep their lives simple and authentic. It was a warm April morning when Amanda Foster burst into the Whitmore General Hospital emergency room. Her face flushed with excitement, and a manila envelope clutched in her hands. "Sarah! Sarah! You need to see this right now," Amanda called out, causing several patients in the waiting room to look up with interest. Sarah emerged from a patient room where she had been taking vital signs for an elderly farmer with a minor burn. "Amanda, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost. Something better. Much better." Amanda thrust the envelope toward Sarah. "This came to the school addressed to me, but it's really for you and Jake. You need to read it immediately." Sarah opened the envelope with growing curiosity. Inside was a letter written on official letterhead from Nashville, along with several photographs and what appeared to be sheet music. The letter was signed by Garth Brooks himself. "Dear Sarah and Jake," Sarah read aloud, "I hope this letter finds you both well and happy. I wanted to reach out because something beautiful has happened that I think you should know about. Your love story, and particularly the video of Jake singing The Dance at your wedding, has continued to impact people in ways that still amaze me." Sarah paused, looking at Amanda with wide eyes before continuing to read. "Over the past several months, I've received hundreds of letters from couples who were inspired by your story to create their own romantic surprises. Men have learned instruments to surprise their wives. Couples have renewed their wedding vows. And more than 50 couples have written to tell me they got engaged after watching Jake's performance and realizing they didn't want to wait any longer to commit to love. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, sinking into a nearby chair as Amanda leaned over her shoulder to read along. But the most beautiful development has been something I never could have anticipated. Musicians around the country, professional and amateur alike, have been sending me videos of themselves performing the dance for couples in their own communities. These performances have happened at weddings, anniversaries, hospitals, nursing homes, and even marriage proposal events. Each one captures the same spirit of love and authenticity that Jake brought to his performance. Sarah's hands were shaking now as she turned to the next page. "I've been so moved by this organic movement of love and music that I've decided to do something special. I'm creating a compilation album called The Dance Stories of Love that will feature some of these performances, along with new recordings of songs about lasting love. Jake, I would be honored to include your original performance from your wedding on this album if you and Sarah agree." "Amanda," Sarah gasped, "are you reading this? He wants to put Jake's wedding performance on an album?" "Keep reading," Amanda urged, practically bouncing with excitement. "But here's the best part. All proceeds from this album will go toward establishing the Sarah and Jake Thompson Foundation, which will provide funding for couples who want to create special romantic moments, but might not have the financial means to do so. The foundation will help pay for everything from engagement rings for young couples to anniversary celebrations for couples who have been married for decades, but never had resources for such luxuries." Sarah stood up abruptly, the letter fluttering to the floor as she covered her face with her hands. "This can't be real. This cannot be real." Amanda picked up the letter and continued reading. "Sarah, I know that you've chosen to keep your lives private, despite all the attention your story has received. And I respect that completely. This foundation would allow your love story to continue helping others without requiring you to be public figures. You would have input on how the foundation operates, but you could remain as private as you choose to be." The letter went on to explain that Garth had already received commitments from several other country music stars to contribute to the album, and that a major record label was eager to distribute it. Legal papers were included to formalize the foundation, and financial projections suggested it could help hundreds of couples every year create their own magical moments. "The final piece of this project," Amanda read from the last page, "is a request. I would love to record a new version of The Dance as a duet with Jake. I know he's not a professional singer, but his heartfelt performance of this song has touched more people than most professional recordings ever do. If he's willing, I'd like to invite both of you to Nashville to record this duet and to officially launch the foundation." Sarah looked up at Amanda with tears streaming down her face. "How is this happening? How does a simple wedding turn into all of this?" "Because," Amanda said softly, "real love is the most powerful force in the world, and when people see it in its purest form, it makes them want to create more love in their own lives." That evening, Sarah and Jake sat at their kitchen table with the letters spread out before them, trying to process the magnitude of what Garth Brooks was proposing. The idea of Jake recording a professional song seemed surreal, but the foundation concept was overwhelming in the best possible way. "Jake, think about what this could mean," Sarah said, studying the financial projections. "We could help a young couple buy engagement rings, or pay for a struggling family to have a nice anniversary dinner, or help someone plan a surprise that shows their love." "It's incredible," Jake agreed. "But are you sure you want our names on a foundation? That's going to bring a lot more attention than we've had so far." Sarah was quiet for a long time, considering the implications. Finally, she spoke. "You know what I keep thinking about? All those letters Garth mentioned. All those couples who were inspired by our story to love each other better. If we can create a way for that inspiration to continue helping people, don't we have a responsibility to do it? Even if it means giving up some of our privacy? Jake, what we have is so strong that I'm not worried about fame or attention changing it. And if we can use our story to help other people create their own beautiful moments, isn't that what love is supposed to do? Isn't it supposed to multiply?" The next morning, Jake called the number listed in Garth's letter. He found himself speaking directly with the star, who was characteristically warm and genuine. "Jake, I was hoping I'd hear from you. What did you and Sarah think about the proposal? Mr. Brooks, we're honored and excited. But we have to ask, are you sure about this? A foundation is a big commitment. And Jake singing on a professional recording. I mean, I'm just a small-town veterinarian." Garth's laugh was warm and reassuring. "Jake, some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard has come from people who aren't professional musicians. Your performance at your wedding had more heart than most songs I hear on the radio. That's exactly what this project needs." They spent an hour discussing the details. The recording session would take place in Nashville the following month. Jake would need to practice with a backing band, but Garth assured him that they would work at Jake's comfort level and pace. The foundation would be administered by professionals, but Sarah and Jake would have final approval on all major decisions about which couples to help. "The goal," Garth explained, "is to create a sustainable way for your love story to keep inspiring and helping others, without turning you into celebrities if that's not what you want." 2 weeks later, Sarah took her first sick day in 3 years, and Jake arranged for a colleague to cover his practice. They drove to Nashville in Jake's pickup truck, a cooler full of Linda Mitchell's homemade sandwiches in the back seat, and a mix of nervous excitement filling the cab. The recording studio was smaller and more intimate than they had expected. Garth met them at the door personally, introducing them to the session musicians who would be backing Jake's vocals. The musicians, all seasoned professionals, treated Jake with genuine respect and enthusiasm. "We've all seen the video of your wedding performance," said the lead guitarist, a woman named Jennifer Hayes, who had played on dozens of hit albums. "What you did that night was pure music, straight from the heart. That's what we want to capture here today." The recording process was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Garth walked him through each verse, helping him find his natural rhythm and encouraging him to sing the way he had at his wedding, with honest emotion rather than technical perfection. "Jake, forget that you're in a professional studio," Garth coached during one of the breaks. "Just imagine you're back in that church hall, looking at Sarah on your wedding day. Sing to her the way you did that night." When Jake looked through the studio glass and saw Sarah watching him with the same expression of love and pride she had worn at their wedding, the nervousness melted away. His voice found its natural groove, and the magic that had captivated their wedding guests filled the Nashville recording studio. The final recording was beautiful. Not polished in the way of typical radio songs, but authentic in a way that touched everyone who heard it. Garth's professional vocals provided a rich harmony to Jake's earnest lead, creating something entirely unique in the country music world. "This is going to mean so much to people," Garth said as they listened to the playback. "Professional singers can create beautiful music, but what you've captured here is something deeper. It's love made audible." During their 3 days in Nashville, Sarah and Jake also worked with attorneys and nonprofit specialists to establish the foundation. They were amazed to learn that Garth had already received preliminary commitments from over a dozen major country music stars to contribute songs to the album. "Why are so many people willing to be part of this?" Sarah asked during one of their planning meetings. "Because your story reminds all of us why we got into music in the first place," explained Rebecca Martinez, Garth's longtime manager. "We wanted to soundtrack people's love stories, to be part of their most important moments. Your wedding video showed us that mission in its purest form." The Sarah and Jake Thompson Foundation for Love was officially established with a mission statement that brought tears to Sarah's eyes: to help couples create meaningful expressions of love regardless of their financial circumstances, because every love story deserves its perfect moment. When they returned to Whitmore, Sarah and Jake found their community buzzing with excitement about their Nashville trip. The local newspaper wanted to do a follow-up story, and the mayor had proclaimed the following Saturday Sarah and Jake Day, in honor of their continuing impact on the town's reputation. But the most meaningful response came from Linda Mitchell, who was waiting for them at their house when they returned. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, noticing that her mother's eyes were red from crying. "I wanted to be the first to welcome you home," Linda said, pulling both Sarah and Jake into a tight hug. "I am so proud of you both. You've taken something beautiful and found a way to make it help other people. That's what love is supposed to do. It's supposed to multiply." Over the following weeks, as news of the foundation and the upcoming album spread, Sarah and Jake were amazed by the response. The foundation's website received hundreds of applications from couples hoping for help with engagement rings, wedding expenses, anniversary celebrations, and renewal ceremonies. The stories that came in were heartbreaking and beautiful. A young soldier wanted to propose to his girlfriend before his deployment, but couldn't afford a ring. An elderly couple married for 50 years had never been able to afford a honeymoon and dreamed of a weekend getaway for their anniversary. A single father wanted to give his teenage daughter a special Sweet 16 party to make up for years of financial struggle after his wife's death. "Jake, look at this one," Sarah said one evening, reading through applications on her laptop. "This is from a couple in Ohio. They've been together for 8 years, but they keep postponing their wedding because they can't afford anything beyond a courthouse ceremony." The woman wrote, "We saw Jake surprise Sarah with that song, and it reminded us that the most important part of a wedding isn't how much money you spend, but how much love you celebrate. Are we really going to be able to help all these people?" Jake asked, looking over her shoulder at the growing list of applications. "We're going to try," Sarah replied. "And even if we can't help everyone, we can help some. And those couples we help will create their own ripple effects of love." The album, The Dance Stories of Love, was released 6 months later, to unprecedented success. It debuted at #1 on the country charts and quickly crossed over to mainstream success. But more importantly, it achieved its mission of inspiring love. Radio stations across the country played Jake and Garth's duet, often followed by DJs sharing listener stories about romantic gestures inspired by the song. The music video for the duet was particularly powerful. It featured footage from Jake and Sarah's original wedding, intercut with scenes of other couples creating their own romantic surprises, all people who had been helped by the foundation. The video ended with a simple message: love multiplies. What story will you create? Within a year, the foundation had helped over 500 couples create special moments. The impact went far beyond the financial assistance. Each couple that received help was asked to pay it forward by doing something kind for another couple in their community, creating an ever-expanding network of love and generosity. Sarah kept a scrapbook of thank you letters and photos from couples the foundation had helped. Her favorite was from a couple in their 70s who had never been able to afford wedding rings during their original ceremony 50 years earlier. The foundation had helped them buy simple gold bands for a ring ceremony surrounded by their children and grandchildren. "Dear Sarah and Jake," the letter read, "We have been married for 50 years without rings, and we thought it was too late to have that ceremony we always dreamed of. Thanks to your foundation, we were able to exchange rings in front of our whole family. Our granddaughter said it was the most romantic thing she had ever seen, and now she believes even more in true love. Thank you for showing us that it's never too late for a fairy tale ending. 2 years after their wedding, Sarah and Jake were invited back to the Grand Ole Opry to perform the dance one more time, this time to celebrate the foundation's success in helping over 1,000 couples. As they walked onto the legendary stage where country music's biggest stars had performed for decades, they thought about the journey that had brought them there. "Mrs. Thompson," Jake said, as they took their positions at the microphones, "are you ready to sing our song one more time?" "With you, always," Sarah replied, taking his hand as the familiar opening chords filled the historic venue. As they sang together for an audience of country music luminaries and foundation supporters, the words of "the dance" carried new meaning. They had indeed been grateful for the dance, even though they couldn't have known where it would lead. Their simple love story had become a force for good in the world, inspiring thousands of couples to love more boldly and authentically. When the song ended and the Opry audience rose in thunderous applause, Sarah and Jake knew they had found their purpose. They would continue their quiet life in Whitmore, Texas, Jake caring for animals, Sarah caring for patients, but they would also continue using their platform to celebrate and support love in all its forms. As they walked off the Opry stage, hand in hand, Sarah squeezed Jake's fingers and smiled. "Ready for whatever comes next, Mr. Thompson?" "With you, I'm ready for anything, Mrs. Thompson." Behind them, the crowd continued applauding, but Sarah and Jake were already thinking about home, their small house on Maple Street, their community that had supported them from the beginning, and the quiet moments of everyday love that had started it all. Their story had become bigger than they ever could have imagined, but at its heart, it remained beautifully simple. Two people who chose to love each other completely, and in doing so, had reminded the world that love was still the most powerful force of all. The Sarah and Jake Thompson Foundation continues to help couples create meaningful expressions of love, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary magic comes from the most ordinary moments shared between two people who choose each other every single day. And somewhere in small towns across America, young men are learning guitar to surprise their brides, because love, once witnessed in its purest form, is impossible to forget and irresistible to emulate. Their dance continues, and the music plays on,